The final installment of our team maps for this World Cup. Let us see how Pakistan, Sri Lanka, New Zealand and South Africa shape up. If you want to know about all the other teams, we've already covered them. Find the links down below. This video is brought to you by Wicket Cricket Manager. Our team maps are a great way to work out who is good as what. You want the teams to be as far out as possible when it comes to batting. So this is a good mark, and this is a good mark, and this is a good mark. And for bowling, you want them to be in as far as possible. So this, and this, all very good. And of course, if there's a team you hate, you want the complete opposite kind of shape. We've also split this up into power play, middle, and death. And we use average and runs per over, but the overall marks are actually ratings. When we look at the best 10 teams when they're playing against the best 10 teams in the last 3 years, we're looking at how much better they were than the average World Cup team in these different disciplines. We just want this to be a shortcut, so instantly we can tell what teams are good at and what they're not good at, while it's also looking quite pretty on the screen. You're going to be shocked to know that Pakistan's batting power play doesn't really lose all that many wickets, but it's not as if they are cashing in on that when it comes to runs per over. They're actually quite slow. Now, if they were using this to get really good over here, that would be one thing. But essentially, they have a really good start. Then they don't lose any wickets in the middle either. But again, in both of these runs per over, they're about par. And actually, if we're being honest, slightly below par when you factor in those first 10 overs. But that's okay, because look, they're keeping all these wickets here and they're keeping all these wickets here. And they're not losing that many wickets here, which means that eventually they should kick on at the... No, they don't kick on at the death either. They're pretty slow all the way through their innings. As I said, all these three areas together, you would have to say that they are a slightly below par batting team when it comes to runs per over. So my main question for Pakistan looking at this and this is, what on earth are you keeping all these wickets for? Are you just collecting them? I mean, yes, they are not terrible, but you look at these averages and you think they could score slightly quicker. Their batters are very good at accumulating. Just let them press the accelerator down occasionally. Of course, all of this would be fine if Pakistan was a brilliant bowling team, and they certainly have brilliant bowlers. But you look at this and it doesn't actually scream that this is a team that's about to take control of the World Cup. Let's start with the power play. They're marginally better than average at this point at taking wickets. They're certainly not one of the elite teams, which is not really what I expected of a Pakistan team. Now, of course, if Shaheen Afridi was always fit and always playing, that might change a little bit. But the truth is they've also lost Nazim Shah here as well. I'm willing to say in the World Cup, this will get slightly better for them and we should expect to see a few extra wickets. However, that isn't really the main issue. The main issue is that in that middle section, they do not take any wickets at all. So unless their openers start to take a lot of wickets, this is going to be a problem. And this is already a problem. I mean, it's not quite a Netherlands point, but it's pretty bad. I actually think that Shadab Khan is a really good all-rounder, and obviously he can bowl, probably more suited to T20 bowling than he is one-day bowling. However, he's the bowler that you want to pair with the more attacking spinner, but they've actually paired him with a less attacking spinner. And that's partly because there aren't a lot of great attacking spinners around in Pakistan at the moment, especially those who can bat, and both of their spinners can bat. This is what happens when you have two holding bowlers. The other team just gets to a point where they don't lose any wickets at all. Now, again, it's not the end of the world when it comes to economy. They're marginally worse than par. So, to be fair, the spoiler bowlers are actually holding on here. That means, despite the fact that they have a lot of bowling talent, they're not really an above par bowling team for the first 40 overs of the game. All of that changes at the death. You can see, despite the fact that these teams aren't really losing a lot of wickets against them, when they get to the death, even the top order are going out. This is fantastic, and this should completely hold up. I feel more trust in this than I do in almost any other stat that I've seen in this team. However, because there are still set batters in the section, they might be getting dismissed, but there are other batters that are coming in later because they haven't lost many wickets all the way through, which means that the overall economy is still, it's above par and it's very, very good, but it's not breathtaking. I suppose what I would say is they're not good enough in the death to overcome the fact that for the first 40 overs, they're not as strong as they probably should be. And I should say, I do have them as the best death team, and I wouldn't say it's too little, but it is a little too late. The truth is that if you are going to be a par batting team, then you certainly have to be an incredible bowling team. And if you look at Pakistan overall, it just doesn't quite feel like that at the moment. Now, Pakistan on paper and Pakistan in real life, very rarely do the two sides meet. I think their middle bowling can be fixed by the seamers actually doing more of the heavy lifting there, and perhaps their spin can actually be used a little bit more throughout the entire innings. And it's also possible that their batters just start going harder, although you would have to wonder why they would suddenly do that under the pressure of the World Cup, having not really done it that much beforehand. So my guess is, if Pakistan are going to get any better, it's working out how to take a few more wickets at the top, which Shaheen should help with, and then manufacturing more wickets in the middle, which is a key part of how Pakistan has actually been successful when they have won Champions Trophies and World Cups. I mean, quite clearly, this is Pakistan. So if their bowling suddenly explodes, they could certainly win this World Cup, and they are a problem for any team. But they won't be a perfect team, and they will be doing it from a position of many flaws. Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geoblock. Go to Surfshark and type my name in KIMBER and get 3 months free today. There is something very New Zealand about the shape of this map. A team that is not great at many things, but not terrible at any. This is basically a cliche of New Zealand cricket that we're looking at here. Their opening batting really hasn't fired all that much at all. Obviously, they've tried Finn Allen, but he hasn't helped as much with run rate as they would have hoped. And also, he's averaging around 30, so not quite giving them the amount of runs that they perhaps would like. And that's why we at this World Cup go with Will Young, because I think he will help them here, even if he won't give them a big massive boost here. That's kind of how they go about it. Even with Martin Guptill, he would quite often explode later in the innings rather than early on. And because of the way they play cricket, it doesn't really bother me if they only fix this one and they stay a little bit slower, because we know that this is a base that they like to have. But as it currently stands, I think they are on the edge of the power play purgatory, sort of not actually making an above average amount of runs and not doing it particularly quickly. I have them as the 6th worst team batting up in the power play. And the problem for New Zealand is it doesn't actually get all that much better afterwards. In the middle, they're about par. So they're not really getting away from anyone. Their average is just slightly above par, and their runs per over is pretty much bang on it. Exactly. Again, they're not terrible, but considering they haven't had a good start, that means the first 40 overs of the innings, they're not doing a lot of damage. Now, of course, Kane Williamson with an elbow and a knee, I suppose, and Daryl Mitchell should provide less wickets here, though I don't know if either of them are actually going to help that much with the scoring rate. Perhaps Mitchell, but generally it'll be towards the 30 over mark when he starts to kick on. Glenn Phillips is the difference maker in this position, although they really want to save him from that period around the 35 over mark when he can make a lot of damage. And then we come to the death, and you can see that again, they're pretty much just a par batting team. I mean, you could argue that it's very beige, and I don't mean that in a sexy 1980s way. And it's not really close. This is the only part of the game where they are a truly elite team at the moment. I would say they're the best in the game. They take almost as many wickets as England do up top, but at a far better economy. And that combination is incredible, and it is where they dominate one days when they're playing very well. Of course, this isn't surprising, as they have like 1 million new ball bowlers available to them at any one stage. They do, however, give that advantage back straight away because they can't really take many middle overs wickets. Mitch Santner was much better in the previous cycle, but sadly he's just no longer that bowler anymore, and in the last 2 years in this period he's been averaging 50. And his partner here would usually be Lockie Ferguson, but he seems to be in an incredible form funk at the moment, and I'm not actually sure if he's in their best 11 as he is currently playing, which is a remarkable thing to say because he's such an incredible talent. The good news is that as bad as this is, the economy's still not too bad. Santner's not particularly easy to get away, and you can see that at the death they take about a par amount of wickets, but teams do score slightly more against them at the death. Again, it's marginally above par, but if you are a bowling team, and specifically in New Zealand's case, a seam bowling team, one that has done very well at the top of the innings, it is noticeable they are not doing very well at the end. And again, part of that will be Lockie Ferguson's form. And the problem with everything I've said here, of course, is that we are in danger again of underestimating New Zealand. But I think if you look back at the 2019 World Cup and we were doing proper analysis at this kind of level, we would have seen that there were plenty of reasons why they actually should have done very well in England. That's not quite the case, I think, when you are having a look at them coming to India specifically. Let's assume mostly in India, you're going to get one of two things. Either very good batting tracks where you'll want to be able to push the foot down and really put pressure on the opposition, or you want wickets that will help spinners. You have a par batting lineup that doesn't like to actually take many chances until the end, and a bowling lineup without any spinners who look like they'll be able to take regular wickets. However, the thing that does give me some hope is they did very well in the T20 World Cup in the UAE. Of course, there they could use Ish Sodhi, who's a much better bowler in T20 cricket than he is in one-day cricket. I think it's probably a spiritual boost, if not, they'll get more runs because Kane Williamson has come back, even if not all those runs will be very quick. But I do wonder how well this team can do without Lockie just being Lockie. I think you look at this shape and you see that they are a very average team almost all the way through, except for the fact they are very good when bowling in the power play. And I think to have a team like that, which can make par scores and occasionally take wickets off the top, could still be a threat. The question is, will they be able to do it in the important games towards the end to make sure that they qualify, and then also to make sure that they win a semi-final and also win a final? It seems that by looking at this team on paper, you are not seeing a World Cup winner, but New Zealand have rested a lot of players over the trip, and of course, Trent Boult is back, so who knows? South Africa is always a tough team to look at for World Cups because, how could you win a tournament when Richie Benaud put a hex on you for changing his rain rules in 1992? It is very hard to evaluate a cricket team that is essentially a bunch of kids in a haunted house in a spooky woods that is built on a sacred Indian burial ground that happens to be full of fast-moving zombies. I think in that last sentence, I've accurately summed up South African World Cup cricket history. However, the last couple of years of ODI cricket, their bilateral numbers look very good. Of course, I could go through the entire history of how often that's happened before, but let's try and stay with this point for a moment. If you have a look at their opening batting, I think they do quite good here. It's a good mark, and also they're going very, very quick. So when South Africa come out to bat, you can see that they are not losing any wickets up top, and they're also scoring at a very good rate. That's an incredibly good combination, and it should hold them in pretty good stead for the World Cup as well. But I think the more remarkable thing is what they do in the middle. You can see here, they don't lose any wickets again, but they're also still scoring well above the rate. And it's that combination that we've seen before that has helped England so much. So they are definitely a plus batting team when it comes to wickets and when it comes to runs per over all the way through. But the death is the one we really want to talk about because this is absolutely crazy. They do not lose wickets at the death. There is a point where this actually looks wrong to me. And by that I mean that they don't lose any wickets at all. And that should be because they're not scoring very fast. But they're still scoring pretty fast at the end. I mean, South Africa and Australia are the two best death batting teams. It's just that somehow South Africa is doing it without losing a single wicket. And I should point out that I've been looking at this for a long time now because I kept waiting for it to fall down and it just did not happen. I've looked at spreadsheets, I've looked at them in person, I've commentated on their games, I've looked at video footage. It is incredible to me. The amount of times they lose about 3 to 4 wickets through this period, and then they get to this period and whoever's there just scores at a massive rate without losing any wickets at all. It's crazy. And I don't believe they could keep doing it, but I also didn't believe they could do it for this long. So now I don't believe what I don't believe. So now I don't know what I don't believe or what I do believe. I don't know. This doesn't make any sense. This is stupid. This right here is stupid. However, there's also something quite weird here. This is a South African team with incredible new ball talent, and they have not been taking wickets. And so I looked into this. I actually double checked both of these peaks because they're both so surprising. Although that one I knew was pretty much right beforehand. This one I was a bit more shocked at. And it turns out that Rabada and Ngidi, when they have played one days, have been absolutely fine. So if they are the two first choice bowlers for South Africa, this will come in quite a bit. It's usually been the other seamers that have been the problems. The worst ones have been Nokia, who I suppose is probably better with a slightly older ball anyway, and Marco Jansen. Marco Jansen you would expect to be good with a new ball, but so far it has not worked. They're both averaging more than 100. So I think it's an issue, but it's probably not as much of an issue for this particular World Cup as this makes out. But they have overcome this by being absolutely brilliant from overs 10 to 40. It's not traditionally where you would think South Africa would have a strength, but Therese Shamsi and Maharaj, and then also players like Norkia when they're coming back in, have been absolutely brilliant at taking wickets in this middle section. And they must be a bit of risk in that because they're still going at runs. So they are clearly attacking with the ball and looking for wickets. So I think if they could continue to take wickets in the middle like this and add a few more here, they'll be really good. Because at the moment, they're letting themselves down a little bit when it comes to their death bowling. I'm not too worried about the wickets, of course, at the death, but they are just a marginally better than par death bowling team. And when you have Rabada, Ngidi, and Norkia, and you've also had a very good thing that has come from your spinners, you would expect them to be a little bit better in this section. But again, they're not terrible, they're just not as good as I would actually believe them to be. Now here's my larger concern, and I'm not talking about the number 7 batter because even though it's still a concern, I'm less worried about that at the moment. But my really big question here is that we have a South African team that is clearly picking 5 bowlers for every game on purpose. They've given up on the idea of even having all-rounders at all. They're hoping Marco Jansen, when he's batting at number 7, will be enough. And yet, with 5 specialist bowlers in their team, they've actually still managed to be a negative bowling team. Now, of course, like every other team in the world, they have rested players. They had a very bad start to this campaign and everything else. But their batting has been absolutely magnificent all the way through this, and their bowling has not been. I think in the pressure situation of a World Cup, you have to expect a couple of collapses from your batting lineup. And their bowling team should be able to cover that. But when I look at this, I don't quite see it at the moment, although I still believe very heavily that they are probably the best bowling team for the conditions in Asia that aren't already Asian. They have the best 1-2 punch of any center spin team, right? So there's something to be said for that. And their top 6 is just ridiculous. I've made a video before how they're basically all batting like superheroes. The other thing I've noticed just recently is that when they beat Australia in a couple of those games, they came into 10-1. So their odds are still reasonably good. But if they do fail and they're around, let's say 8, 9, 10, even 11-1 coming into this tournament, this won't be choking. Right? This will just be probably something to do with their number 7, or their batters just can't do what they were supposed to do for every particular game, or their bowlers didn't take enough wickets up the top to back up what they were doing in the middle. So basically what I'm saying is it won't be a choke. This is a very flawed team that is being absolutely carried by some phenomenal performances with the middle order in the bat and quality spin. If either of those two things fall down, it won't be a choke. They'll just lose. And now we come to Sri Lanka, who had become a bit of everyone's favorite outsider for a little while there. And of course, in the Asia Cup, they did pretty well until they absolutely did not do well at all. And it makes sense. They do have a fantastic bowling team. And if you only look at bowling, they should certainly have a chance of winning this tournament. Unfortunately, they will have to bat at one point. It's also worth remembering that a lot of their good form actually came against the qualifying teams. And when they were playing the best teams regularly, they were nowhere near as good as they have been over the last 10 or 15 games. And when you look at their batting here, you could see that it's not good, is it? I mean, they basically, this is as close as you could get for a major team to not have opening batters at all, from what I can tell. You know, this is almost like they sent out pinch hitters all the time, or they reversed their order like the old day. However, for all the wickets they're losing at the top, they're still scoring at a decent rate. So good on them for keeping the game moving onwards, even as they're losing so many batters. And it's worth pointing out that they certainly don't score quick enough to make up for this. I'm not sure how quick they would need to score to actually make up for this. And the bad news is that they get much worse in the middle. I mean, this is a truly horrendous mark. I don't even know how you manage to do this. And this is the period when they're batting so poorly that it does actually start to affect their runs per over. And that's because we're talking about them regularly being, 4, 5, maybe even 6 wickets down by the 35th over, which means that anyone who comes in can't attack. And of course, the final problem with the fact they're losing wickets at the top and they're losing wickets in the middle is that, of course, they're going to lose wickets at the death because you're going to have a lot of players who shouldn't be out there batting. So they're faster than they should be at the top. They're well under par in the middle, and then they're well under par at the death. This is a really bad death mark. And when I look at my overall rankings, I have them as the 8th best team in the power play. I have them as the 9th best team in the middle. And then at the death, I have them as the 7th best team. This is really a tremendously horrible batting lineup. In fact, I just want to point this out specifically, but because of all these wickets here, their lower order should actually get paid more for the extra work they have to do. Their new ball bowling hasn't been about par and wickets, and maybe they could be better than that because they do have a lot of good seamers at the moment, although all their seamers always seem to be injured, so I'm not sure how many of them were ever fit for any of these games. But certainly when you look at runs per over, teams aren't getting away from them all that much. In terms of taking wickets, they are the third best team in the middle. Again, weirdly enough, it doesn't play out as much in the run rate as you probably would have liked, but being that they're taking wickets at a pretty decent rate, or at least an ordinary rate at the top, and then they're taking them quite good at the middle, you can see that by the time they get to the end, they're taking a lot of wickets, which means when you play Sri Lanka, you are regularly going to lose 6, 7, 8 wickets, and occasionally they will bowl you out. If you look at these two areas, they're just marginally above runs per over par there and just below it here. So that works out to about equal. But because, again, they've taken so many wickets, you can't kick on at the death against them. I don't think you can look at this and say they are anything other than a really, really good bowling team. Runs per over is the question mark I have, but because they're getting so many regular wickets, they're certainly making you pay at the end. But if you think about the fact they can spin the ball in both directions, they have left and right arm seamers that are pretty good up top. They have Patharana at the death. There's just a lot of different options that they can throw at you. And of course, a couple of their bowling options can also bat as well. And of course, they have flexibility because of that batting with their bowlers, especially Hasaranga if he's fit. But there is absolutely no doubt that this is one of the best bowling teams in the tournament. They just look really good on paper and when we watch them, right? I think of recent times, and maybe not the very most recent time, because we saw how that went, but of recent times, their batting has started to improve, but it hasn't really got to the point where I'd say they have plus batting. They're getting closer to par batting, but their bowling attack is obviously a very huge strength of theirs. So even par batting, because of their ability to take wickets pretty much all the way through the innings, maybe outside of that power play, means that they only need to regularly score around 260 to 270 to put pressure on you. If they could somehow work out to take some early wicket victims and even some par batting along the time, I'm not sure they're that much different to Pakistan, even if Pakistan are a much better batting lineup. And so at that stage, you would have to say that Sri Lanka are a genuine chance of being a semi-finalist. But at their worst, they never make enough runs. Their bowlers don't take wickets in the power play, and teams just knock them around knowing that they're never going to be under that much pressure to outscore Sri Lanka. So I think it's more likely that Sri Lanka is a team that can certainly beat the best teams, but probably not win enough consistently themselves. Well, that's all we have. That's it. Thank you for watching this series so far. Remember that you can support us on Patreon or buy me a coffee, or even just by commenting, liking, subscribing, sharing, all the things that people do. We will be covering this World Cup from a global perspective, and we'll be doing it, kind of every day. There will be analysis, hot topics, and live responses to games. For all our produced videos, you can get them right here on this channel. For the live videos that we're recording, you'll need to hop over to the Jarrod Kimber podcast channel. But there are links to all of these things in the show notes. But thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.